Love bleeds out twice. Once when betrayal pierces the heart, and again when the wound is stitched closed forever. Dylan Prescott woke up from life-saving kidney surgery and immediately served his wife Megan with divorce papers, calling her useless while praising his mistress Vanessa for sacrificing everything to save him. But there's something Dylan doesn't know. Something about that surgery, about who really went under the knife, about the medical records Megan locked away before walking out with $5 million and a smile that promised consequences he couldn't imagine. Before we go deeper into the story, you are welcome to Empire Stories. We're building a community that refuses to accept neglect and betrayal as normal. If you believe women deserve respect, loyalty, and real love, not control disguised as protection, subscribe and help us get to 10,000 subscribers. Your support helps us spread these stories to people who need to know. They deserve better, and it's okay to walk away. The morphine hadn't worn off yet, but Dylan Prescott's eyes snapped open like a man surfacing from drowning. White ceiling tiles, the antiseptic bite of hospital air, pain blooming across his abdomen like a stain spreading through silk. He was alive. "Baby, you're awake." Vanessa King's voice dripped honey and relief as she leaned over him, her blonde hair cascading like a halo, white cashmere sweater pristine against the sterile room. Her fingers found his face, trembling. "I did it. I actually did it for you." Dylan's throat felt raw, his tongue thick. He blinked, trying to process. The surgery, the kidney, Vanessa's tearful promise in the pre-op room that she'd give him anything, everything, even parts of herself. "You." His voice came out gravel and smoke. "You saved me. I told you I would." She pressed her forehead to his, and he caught the scent of her perfume, expensive and cloying. "I couldn't lose you, Dylan. Not like this." Movement by the door pulled his attention. Megan Prescott stood in shadow, one hand pressed against the doorframe, the other clutching her side. His wife wore a charcoal business suit that made her look severe, untouchable. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face. She didn't move toward him, didn't speak, just watched with those unreadable eyes that had always made him feel like she was calculating something he couldn't see. Dylan's gratitude curdled into something uglier. 3 years of marriage, and when he'd been dying, when his kidneys had shut down and the doctors said he had weeks without a transplant, Megan had done nothing. Made excuses, talked about exploring options and medical consultations, while he turned yellow with toxins his body couldn't filter. Vanessa had stepped up in 48 hours, got tested, matched, signed the papers. "Get out." The words scraped out of Dylan's throat, aimed at the woman in the doorway. Megan's expression didn't change. That was the thing about her that had always unnerved him. The stillness, like she was made of marble, not flesh. "Dylan, don't." Vanessa tried, playing her role perfectly, but he cut her off. 3 years, Megan. 3 years you stood by my side, took my name, spent my money. His hand found Vanessa's, squeezed. The 4 tugged at his arm, but he didn't care. "And when I needed you most, you couldn't even lift a finger to save me. You're gutless. Useless." Finally, something flickered across Megan's face. Not hurt, not anger. Something colder, more dangerous. A light switched on behind her eyes. "Vanessa gave me life." Dylan's voice strengthened with each word, fed by righteousness and morphine-dulled fury. "She proved what love actually means. You just take up space." He released Vanessa's hand long enough to grab the manila envelope from the side table, the one his lawyer had delivered yesterday. His throw was weak, but the envelope sailed across the room and hit the floor at Megan's feet with a slap that echoed. "Divorce papers. I want you gone." Megan stared at the envelope. Then, slowly, she bent down. The movement was careful, controlled, like every gesture hurt, but she refused to let it show. When she straightened, she held the envelope against her chest. "How much?" Her voice was steady. "What? How much will you pay me to disappear quietly?" Megan's gaze locked onto his, And Dylan saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Not submission, not defeat. Calculation. No alimony. No company shares. No properties. Just cash. One payment. Then I'm gone. And you never hear from me again. Vanessa inhaled sharply. Even through the medication fog, Dylan recognized this for what it was. Megan showing her true colors. Gold digging to the end. His father had warned him about marrying outside the organization, about trusting someone who didn't grow up in this world. How much do you want? 5 million. Liquid. Transferred within 48 hours. Megan's thumb traced the edge of the envelope. Sign the wire authorization and I'll sign these. Then I'll pack my things and you'll never see me again. 5 million. It would drain his immediate cash reserves, force him to liquidate some investments at a bad time. But to be rid of her, to start fresh with Vanessa, the woman who'd literally given him a piece of herself? Done. Dylan's smile was vicious. My lawyer will have the paperwork ready tomorrow. You're finally showing me who you really are, Megan. At least you're honest about being a mercenary. At least one of us is honest. Megan tucked the envelope under her arm, her other hand still pressed against her side. I'll be out of the penthouse by Friday. She turned toward the door, movements measured and precise. Megan. Dylan's voice stopped her. She looked back, expression blank. I hope it was worth it. Trading a marriage for money. That's all you ever were, wasn't it? A transaction. Something like a smile ghosted across Megan's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost pitiful. You have no idea what I traded, Dylan. But you will. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her with the finality of a vault ceiling. Vanessa curled against Dylan's side, careful of his 4 lines and surgical sight. I'm sorry, baby. I know that must have been hard. No. Dylan threaded his fingers through her hair, feeling the kidney she'd given him sitting in his body, foreign but life-giving. That was easy. She made it easy. Through the window, the Honolulu skyline glittered against the afternoon sun, palm trees swaying in the breeze. Dylan Prescott was alive, free of his useless wife, and beginning again with the woman who'd saved him. He had never been so certain of anything in his life. He had also never been so completely, catastrophically wrong. The door closed, the trap was set, and the woman who'd sacrificed everything had just decided to take it all back, with interest. The law offices of Kahale and Associates occupied the 42nd floor of the Imperial Tower, where Honolulu's most ruthless dealt with their most delicate problems behind mahogany doors and non-disclosure agreements. Megan Prescott sat across from 3 men in identical charcoal suits, her posture military straight despite the fire that still burned along her left side where the incision was healing. She hadn't taken the prescribed painkillers. Needed her mind sharp. Mrs. Prescott, we've prepared a very generous settlement package. The lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Kahale, slid a leather portfolio across the conference table. 20% stake in Prescott Enterprises, the Kahala estate, alimony of $50,000 monthly for 10 years, and, no, Kahale's practiced smile faltered. I'm sorry. I don't want any of it. Megan pushed the portfolio back without opening it. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them, the Pacific stretched blue and indifferent. No company shares, no properties, no alimony. The 3 lawyers exchanged glances. The younger one, Torres, leaned forward. Mrs. Prescott, with all respect, you're entitled to $5 million. Cash. Wired to an account I'll provide within 48 hours. Megan's voice never rose, never wavered. In exchange, I sign a complete release. No claims to the business, the property's future earnings, nothing. Clean break. Kahale set down his Mont Blanc pen. That's unusually straightforward. I want out. He wants me gone. This makes it simple. She met his eyes. Or would you prefer I lawyer up and drag this through the courts for 2 years, while I'm entitled to live in the marital home and draw from joint accounts? The logic was sound, even if the number made them wince. Kahale excused himself, phone already to his ear before he reached the hallway. Megan heard Dylan's voice through the door, loud, even muffled by expensive wood. 5 million? That's what the mercenary wants. A pause. Fine. Pay her. I want her signature on those papers before she changes her mind and decides to bleed me dry the legal way. When Kahale returned, his expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Prescott agrees to your terms. We'll have the wire authorization and final settlement documents ready by tomorrow at 3. I'll be here. Megan stood, and the movement pulled at stitches that felt like they were tearing her in half. She didn't let it show on her face. One more thing. Yes. I want it in the agreement that neither party will make public statements about the other or the reasons for the divorce. Complete mutual non-disparagement clause. Torres nodded, making notes. Standard in high-profile divorces. We can include that. Good. Megan collected her bag, a black leather Birkin that Dylan had given her for their 2nd anniversary. She'd sell it next week. Everything from their marriage would be converted to cash or burned. Gentlemen. She made it to the elevator before her knees started shaking. Made it to the parking garage before she had to lean against a concrete pillar. One hand pressed to her side where they'd carved out a part of her to save a man who looked at her like garbage. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hear you're getting a nice payday. Guess you finally showed your true colors. Vanessa. Of course Dylan had told her. Probably in bed. Probably laughing about how his ex-wife had revealed herself as nothing more than a gold digger who couldn't even be bothered to save his life. Megan deleted the message and climbed into her car. A sleek Audi that would be returned to the dealership by Friday. She had 48 hours until the money hit her account. 48 hours until she was legally free. And the rest of her life to watch Dylan Prescott realize exactly what he'd thrown away. What would you do with $5 million and freedom from someone who betrayed you? Drop your answer in the comments. She drove toward the modest apartment she'd secured in Kailua. Windows down, salt air whipping through her hair. In the rearview mirror, the Imperial Tower grew smaller, a monument to power and money and men who thought they were untouchable. Dylan Prescott had no idea he'd just paid for the rope she'd used to hang him. The penthouse had never felt like home, but leaving it still required surgical precision. Megan moved through rooms she'd decorated, past furniture she'd chosen, extracting only what was hers and nothing that would give Dylan ammunition to claim she'd stolen from him. 3 suitcases, a box of books, the diploma from Johns Hopkins that she'd earned before she met him, back when she thought love and sacrifice were the same thing. Friday afternoon, the movers came for her minimal belongings. She supervised from the kitchen island, one hand pressed subtly against her left side, where the incision burned beneath her silk blouse. The bandages needed changing. She'd do it at the new apartment, away from eyes that might notice and question. Dylan didn't come home to say goodbye. She hadn't expected him to. What she didn't expect was finding Vanessa's toothbrush already in the master bathroom, sitting in the holder next to where Megan's had been that morning. Pink and electric, smug in its placement. The message was clear. You were already replaced before you even left. Megan took one last look at the bedroom where she'd slept beside a man who'd never really seen her, then closed the door on 3 years of her life. The Kailua apartment was small, furnished, and anonymous. Perfect. She locked the door behind her, set down her bags, and immediately went to the bathroom mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she unbuttoned her blouse, peeled away the blood-spotted bandage, and examined the wound that Dylan didn't know existed. The incision ran 6 inches along her left flank, angry red and puckered where the surgical staples held her together. They'd used a laparoscopic approach, told her she was lucky it wasn't worse, that she'd heal in 6 to 8 weeks if she took it easy and didn't lift anything heavy. She'd moved an entire household 3 weeks post-op. Megan cleaned the wound with antiseptic, the sting nothing compared to the ache of watching Dylan choose his mistress over the wife who'd literally carved out a piece of herself to save him. Fresh bandage. New blouse. Hair combed. By the time she looked presentable again, the sun was setting over the ocean visible from her tiny lanai. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Instagram. She shouldn't look. She absolutely shouldn't. But she did. Dylan's profile, public because image mattered in his world, showed a new post from an hour ago. Him and Vanessa at Duke's Waikiki, her hand displaying a diamond that could choke a horse. The caption read, "She said yes. When you know, you know. Life's too short to waste time. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag blessed." For 1,000 likes already. Comments flooding in with congratulations, heart emojis, people calling them beautiful together. Someone wrote, "So happy you found your soulmate after everything you've been through." Megan's finger hovered over the screen. She could comment, could reveal everything right now, burn his world down with medical records and truth. Instead, she screenshot the post, saved it to a folder labeled Evidence, and set the phone down. Across town, in a penthouse that used to be half hers, Dylan and Vanessa were probably celebrating. Champagne on ice, imported oysters, planning a wedding that would make the society pages, announcing to all of Honolulu that Dylan Prescott had upgraded. What they weren't planning for was the biological countdown ticking inside Dylan's body. The kidney that needed specific care, specific diet, specific medications managed by someone who understood post-transplant protocols. Vanessa King understood makeup tutorials and charity galas. She understood how to pose for cameras and spend money that wasn't hers. She didn't understand that grapefruit juice and certain medications could trigger rejection. That alcohol was poison to a transplanted kidney. That the salty, rich foods Dylan loved could destroy him from the inside. But she'd learn. They both would. Megan stood on her lanai, watching the sun bleed into the Pacific, her hand pressed against the wound that proved love could be weaponized against the lover. She watched the city lights flicker on one by one, each one a star in the sky of her enemy's false heaven. The wedding was in 3 weeks. She'd marked it on her calendar. She wouldn't be attending, but she'd be watching. The wedding happened on a Saturday at the Royal Hawaiian Pink Palace against blue sky, with 300 guests in attendance. Megan saw the photos on social media, watched the carefully curated story unfold through other people's posts. Vanessa in white lace, Dylan in a Tom Ford tuxedo that hung slightly loose on his frame. He'd lost weight since the surgery. No one seemed to notice except Megan. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Bora Bora. More photos. Vanessa in bikinis, Dylan shirtless on the beach, the surgical scar visible across his abdomen like a badge of honor. The comments gushed about his bravery, about Vanessa's selfless gift, about true love conquering all. Megan studied every image with clinical detachment. In the restaurant photos, she saw champagne flutes, cocktails with umbrellas. Dylan's face flushed red in ways that had nothing to do with sun exposure and everything to do with alcohol hitting a compromised filtration system. She made notes, dated them, saved everything. When they returned to Honolulu, Dylan went back to work at Prescott Enterprises, throwing himself into deals and territory disputes with the manic energy of a man trying to prove he was invincible. Vanessa settled into the penthouse like a cat in cream, redecorating, hosting dinner parties, playing the role of Mafia wife with enthusiasm if not competence. It was at one of those dinner parties, 6 weeks post-transplant, that the negligence became lethal. Megan knew because she'd maintained one connection in that world. Rita, the housekeeper who'd worked for Dylan's family for 20 years and who'd always treated Megan with quiet kindness. Rita still texted occasionally, brief updates wrapped in concern. Rita, Mrs. King made seared ahi with grapefruit glaze tonight. Mr. Prescott ate 3 servings. Said it was delicious. Megan's blood went cold. Grapefruit, the citrus that interacted catastrophically with immunosuppressants, the drugs keeping Dylan's body from rejecting the foreign kidney. The drugs he had to take religiously for the rest of his life. 1 glass of grapefruit juice could spike the medication levels in his blood to toxic ranges or render them completely ineffective. 3 servings of grapefruit glaze. Megan, what else did she serve? Rita, bacon-wrapped scallops. Truffle mac and cheese with extra parmesan. Those little sausages he likes. Salted caramel dessert. He loves her cooking. Says she takes such good care of him. Every dish is loaded with sodium. Salt that would spike his blood pressure, strain the transplanted kidney, cause fluid retention and swelling. The exact foods the transplant team would have told him to avoid. Rita, he didn't look good by dessert. Pale. Sweating. But he told everyone he was fine. Mrs. King keeps saying he needs to build his strength back up with real food, not hospital garbage. Megan set her phone down with shaking hands. This wasn't just ignorance. This was slow-motion murder, committed with good intentions and zero medical knowledge by a woman who thought she understood transplant recovery because she'd Googled it once. Dylan would be feeling it now. The nausea, the fatigue, the way his body struggled to process what she was feeding him. But he wouldn't connect it to the food because Vanessa had given him her kidney. Why would his savior hurt him? Trust was the weapon. Vanessa wielded it with every meal. Megan, how long has he been eating like this? Rita, since they got back from Bora Bora. Every night. She says she's making up for lost time, showing him what real devotion looks like. 2 weeks of nutritional sabotage. Dylan's body was probably screaming, and he was dismissing every symptom as normal recovery because the woman poisoning him wore a halo he'd placed there himself. Megan opened her laptop, pulled up the medical journals she'd been reading. Acute rejection could happen anytime, but it was most dangerous in the first 3 months when triggered by medication interactions or protocol violations. The symptoms: fatigue, nausea, fever, decreased urine output, pain at the transplant site, sudden weight gain from fluid retention. She pulled up Dylan's Instagram. His most recent post from yesterday. A selfie at his desk, caption reading back to the grind. Feeling a little off but nothing the king can't handle. In the photo, his face looked puffy. His eyes were tired. The comments were all supportive, telling him to rest, that he was pushing too hard. No one knew he wasn't pushing too hard. He was being pushed toward organ failure, one gourmet meal at a time. Megan closed the laptop. Not yet. If she intervened now, she'd be the bitter ex-wife trying to ruin his happiness. He wouldn't believe her. Vanessa would spin it as jealousy. She needed him sicker. She needed the damage undeniable. She needed him to realize, publicly and irrevocably, that the woman he'd chosen over his wife was killing him with kindness and grapefruit glaze. The first public crack appeared during a board meeting in late November. Megan knew because the video leaked. Someone's phone camera shaking as Dylan Prescott, face bloated and gray, swept an entire conference table clear with one arm. Laptops, tablets, coffee cups crashing to the floor while 8 executives sat frozen. I said the numbers are fine. Dylan's voice was raw, strained. Anyone who questions my judgment can find another organization to work for, preferably one that doesn't break their kneecaps. The video was cut off, but it circulated through Honolulu's business community like wildfire, whispered about in the same breath as concerns about Prescott Enterprises' recent erratic decisions. 3 deals killed at the last minute. 2 longtime partners cut off without explanation. Dylan's behavior grew more volatile by the week. Megan watched the video 12 times, studying not his anger but his appearance. The puffiness around his eyes. The way he braced himself against the table before the outburst, like standing required effort. The sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Classic signs. Fatigue. Fluid retention. The body is struggling. She scrolled through his Instagram feed, a timeline of deterioration disguised as luxury lifestyle content. 2 weeks ago, Dylan and Vanessa at a whiskey tasting event, him holding a tumbler of 18-year Macallan. Caption: living my best life with my best girl. His face is already showing the telltale bloat. 10 days ago, brunch at Hoku's, Vanessa's mimosa next to Dylan's Bloody Mary. The hair of the dog caption is trying to be funny. Dylan's smile did not reach his eyes, which looked sunken and tired. For days ago, a selfie from their home gym. Dylan shirtless, trying to flex, but the definition was gone. His midsection swollen, skin stretched. Vanessa in the background, beaming. Caption, recovery gains with my angel's cooking. She's fattening me up right. The comments were concerning. People asking if he was okay, if he should see his doctor, if maybe he was overdoing it. Vanessa replied to every single one with variations of, he's perfect, just building healthy weight back. Transplant recovery takes time. She had no idea she was documenting his decline. Rita's texts came more frequently now, each one a small knife in Megan's restraint. Rita, he threw up after dinner tonight. Mrs. King said it's just rich food on a sensitive stomach. Made him chicken soup with miso broth. He ate 3 bowls. Miso. More sodium. More strain. Rita, he's sleeping 12 hours a night now. She tells people he's finally relaxing for the first time in years. Not relaxation. Fatigue. The body shutting down. Rita, his ankles are swollen. She bought him looser shoes. Said his other ones must have shrunk. Edema. Fluid the kidney couldn't process. Rita, he fired his assistant today for bringing him the wrong coffee. Cried after. Said he doesn't know what's wrong with him. Mrs. King told him it's just stress. Megan sat in her small apartment, phone in hand, watching a man destroy himself because he trusted the wrong woman. Every instinct screamed at her to intervene, to call his doctor, to do something. But she'd learned 3 years ago that Dylan Prescott didn't listen to women who loved him. He only learned from the consequences. And his was coming. A new post appeared on his feed, uploaded by Vanessa from Dylan's account. Him sleeping on the couch, mouth open, looking 10 years older than his 38. Vanessa's caption, my hardworking king needs his rest. Planning something special to help him recharge? Stay tuned. The announcement came 2 days later. Professionally designed graphics across all of Dylan's platforms. Recovery Celebration Gala. Join us for an evening honoring resilience, second chances, and the power of love. Prescott Estate Beachfront. December 20th. Black tie. Benefiting kidney disease research. Vanessa's touch was all over it. The flowery language. The charity angle. The desperation to prove to Honolulu's elite that Dylan was thriving, not failing. Megan read the invitation 3 times. December 20th. 3 weeks away. Dylan would be nearly 4 months post-transplant by then. If Vanessa kept feeding him the way Rita described, if he kept drinking and kept ignoring every medical protocol, his body would be approaching a crisis point. Would you speak up if you knew someone was being slowly destroyed by ignorance, or let them learn the hard way? Comment below. She opened her locked desk drawer, pulled out the medical file she'd been building. Her surgical records. The DNA compatibility report shows a perfect genetic match. The notarized statement from her surgeon, obtained at great expense and greater risk, confirming she was the donor. The evidence was complete. The stage was set. All she needed now was the audience. Megan picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and scrolled to a name she hadn't used in months. Lawrence Chen, entertainment reporter for the Honolulu Tribune, a man who'd once tried to interview her about life as a Mafia wife and who she'd politely declined. Megan. Lawrence, this is Megan Prescott. I have a story for you. One you'll want to be present for. The reply came within minutes. Lawrence. I'm listening. Megan. December 20th. The Recovery Gala. Bring a photographer. I'll give you the exclusive of the year. Lawrence. What kind of exclusive? Megan. The kind that ends careers and starts yours. Be there. She set down the phone and looked out at the ocean, dark now under a moonless sky. 3 weeks until Dylan Prescott's world collapsed. 3 weeks until the truth came for him in a designer gown and bulletproof evidence. 3 weeks until the woman he'd thrown away threw him to the wolves he'd invited to dinner. The formal invitation arrived at Megan's apartment on a Thursday, Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing that probably cost more per sheet than her monthly utilities. Someone had hand-addressed it to her Kailua address. Rita's handwriting. She recognized immediately. A small act of rebellion from a woman who'd watched the Prescott household for 2 decades and knew exactly what was happening. Recovery Celebration Gala. An evening under the stars. Prescott Beachfront Estate. December 20th, 7 p.m. Aloha formal attire. RSVP regrets only. The invitation included a smaller card with an elegant script. Join us in celebrating Dylan Prescott's miraculous recovery and honoring the selfless gift of organ donation. The evening includes traditional Hawaiian luau, live entertainment, and a special recognition ceremony. Benefiting the Pacific Kidney Foundation. Megan studied the invitation against her kitchen counter. A luau. Of course Vanessa would choose that, turning Dylan's recovery into a spectacle of tiki torches, roasted pig, and tropical drinks. The most public possible setting, designed to broadcast strength and vitality to the investors who'd been quietly pulling away from Prescott Enterprises as Dylan's behavior grew more erratic. She flipped to the guest list printed on the back, over 200 names. Every major player in Honolulu's legitimate and illegitimate business circles. City council members, charity board directors, the chief of police. Even the mayor's office was represented. And at the bottom, in small print, media coverage by invitation only. Megan set the invitation down and opened her laptop. Dylan's desperation was showing. According to Rita's latest text, 3 major investors had requested assurances about his health before committing to the expansion deal that would push Prescott Enterprises into Maui's territory. Rumors were circulating that Dylan was unstable, unreliable, possibly still sick. This gala wasn't a celebration. It was damage control. She pulled up her secure cloud storage, the one she'd set up the day after leaving the penthouse. Inside, 43 documents organized with the precision of someone who'd spent 3 years married to a man who taught her that power lived in paperwork. Her surgical consent forms, with the date stamped 3 days before Dylan's transplant. The hospital billing records in her name, itemizing nephrectomy procedure costs. The pathology report confirmed her kidneys removal and successful transplantation. The DNA compatibility analysis showed a perfect 6-antigen match between her tissue and Dylan's, the kind of match that only happened between siblings or, in rare cases, unrelated individuals who happen to share genetic markers. And the crown jewel, a notarized affidavit from Dr. Marcus Webb, the transplant surgeon, stating that Megan Prescott had been the anonymous living donor for Dylan Prescott's kidney transplant. The document had cost her $20,000 in legal fees and careful negotiation, signed only after she'd secured ironclad protections for the doctor against any HIPAA violations. The affidavit was bulletproof. Dr. Webb had confirmed that Vanessa King had never been tested for compatibility, had never undergone any surgical procedure, and had never been a candidate for donation due to blood type incompatibility. Vanessa King's blood type was A positive. Dylan's was O negative. Anyone with basic biology knowledge knew O negative patients could only receive O negative organs. But Dylan hadn't asked. He'd simply believed. Megan compiled everything into a single presentation file, organized chronologically, each document scanned at high resolution. She added photos, her surgical scars, dated with timestamp metadata. A side-by-side comparison of her hospital admission on the same day as Dylan's transplant, both of them in the same surgical wing. The evidence wasn't just compelling. It was irrefutable. Her phone buzzed. Lawrence Chin. Lawrence. Got credentials for the gala. Press pool is limited to 3 photographers and 2 reporters. I'm one of them. What am I looking for? Megan. The recognition ceremony. When Dylan thanks Vanessa for her sacrifice. That's when you'll want every camera rolling. Lawrence. This is about kidney donation? Megan. This is about the truth, which is worth more than whatever story you think you're covering. Lawrence. You're going to blow this up publicly? Megan. I'm going to let the facts speak. You just need to make sure everyone hears them. She set the phone down and walked to her closet, where a garment bag hung alone. Inside was a dress she'd purchased last week from a boutique in Waikiki, crimson red silk that hugged every curve and cost more than she'd spent on clothing in the past year combined. War paint, her mother would have called it. The kind of dress that demanded attention and promised consequences. The kind of dress you wore when you stopped being invisible and became unforgettable. December 20th. 11 days away. Megan pulled up Dylan's latest Instagram post. A promotional video for the gala, him looking haggard despite professional lighting, Vanessa radiant beside him. His voice was hoarse as he spoke about celebrating life, love, and second chances with the woman who gave me mine. The comments were supportive but cautious. People noticed. They just didn't understand what they were seeing yet. But they would. Megan screenshot the video, added it to her evidence folder, and began drafting the speech she'd give in 11 days. Every word would be true. Every claim would be documented. And when she was finished, Dylan Prescott's empire wouldn't just be shaken. It would be built on sand revealed by the tide going out. The Prescott beachfront estate glowed like a fever dream against the December night. Tiki torches lined the private beach in perfect rows, their flames dancing in the salt breeze. A traditional emu pit smoked at the center of the lawn, the scent of Kahlua pork mixing with plumeria and expensive perfume. White tents billowed like sails, strung with lights that turned the venue into something between a fairy tale and a stage. 200 guests in aloha formal were moved through the space with champagne flutes and carefully neutral expressions. They'd come to assess, not celebrate, to determine if Dylan Prescott was still a man worth doing business with, or if his empire was circling the drain along with his health. Vanessa stood near the emu pit in white because of course she did. A flowing goddess gown that practically shimmered with virtue, plumeria flowers woven into her blonde hair like a crown. She touched every guest who approached, accepting their praise with practiced humility, playing the role of selfless savior with Oscar-worthy commitment. Dylan stood beside her in a custom aloha shirt that couldn't hide what it was designed to conceal. His face had the gray pallor of wet concrete, sweat beading at his temples despite the cool evening air. The shirt hung loose on a frame that had lost definition, his midsection thick with fluid retention that made him look soft rather than strong. He gripped a tumbler of what looked like whiskey, his third since the event began an hour ago, and smiled too widely at jokes that weren't funny. The investors circled at a careful distance, talking to each other instead of to him. The damage control wasn't working. Lawrence Chun stood near the press pool, camera crew positioned for optimal coverage of the recognition ceremony scheduled for 8 o'clock. He kept checking his phone, kept scanning the entrance pathway lit with more tiki torches leading from the private road. Then she arrived, and the entire energy of the party shifted like a wave changing direction. Megan Prescott walked down the torchlit path in crimson silk that moved like blood in water. The dress was strapless, showcasing shoulders and collarbones sharp enough to cut, a figure that proved health rather than claimed it. Her dark hair fell in waves over one shoulder, minimal jewelry except for diamond studs that caught firelight with every movement. She wore red lipstick the color of consequences and heels that brought her to 6 feet of barely contained fury wrapped in couture. She hadn't RSVP'd. She didn't need to. The photographer nearest the entrance turned instinctively. Then the others followed. Flashbulbs popped. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Is that his ex-wife? I heard she took him for $5 million. She looks incredible. Look at her. Does she look like someone who's suffering? Megan moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who owned the ground she walked on, even if the deed was in someone else's name. Guests parted instinctively, creating a path that led straight toward the center of the party where Dylan and Vanessa held court. Dylan saw her, and his face went from gray to chalk white. The tumbler in his hand trembled. Vanessa followed his stare, her practiced smile freezing into something harder, sharper. What is she doing here? Vanessa's whisper carried farther than she intended, caught by the nearest reporter's microphone. Megan stopped 10 feet away, close enough to be in their orbit but not close enough to be dismissed as confrontational. She picked up a champagne flute from a passing server's tray, raised it slightly in their direction, a gesture that could have been a toast or a threat. "Congratulations on your recovery, Dylan." Her voice was clear, warm, even, projecting across the suddenly quiet section of beach. "You look exactly as well as expected." The barb landed softly enough that most guests smiled uncertainly, unsure if it was sincere or surgical. Dylan's jaw clenched. "You weren't invited." The invitation said, "Regrets only." "I have none." Megan took a sip of champagne, her eyes never leaving his face. "This is a celebration of organ donation, isn't it? Honoring the gift of life? Seems like I should be here." Vanessa moved closer to Dylan, threading her arm through his possessively. "This is a private event celebrating my sacrifice for the man I love. If you can't be happy for us, then—" "Oh, I'm fascinated by sacrifice." Megan's smile was all teeth. "In fact, I think everyone here should understand exactly what sacrifice looks like, what it costs, what it means." Lawrence Chin moved closer, camera crew following. Other guests pressed in, sensing blood in the water. The musicians had stopped playing. Even the catering staff had paused to watch. Dylan tried to step forward but swayed slightly, his hand going to Vanessa's arm for support rather than affection. The weakness was visible, undeniable, caught by 3 different cameras. "Security," he called out, voice strained. "Escort her out." "Not yet." Megan set down her champagne glass on a nearby table. "You planned a recognition ceremony, didn't you? A moment to honor Vanessa's generous donation? I'd hate to miss that." She turned to face the crowd, and in that moment, with firelight painting her in shades of red and gold, she looked like something ancient and inevitable. Not a wronged wife, a reckoning. In fact, I insist on staying for it. After all, her eyes found Dylan's again, held them with surgical precision. Someone should make sure the right person gets recognized for the kidney that saved your life. The silence that followed was absolute. And in that silence, Dylan Prescott realized he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. Dylan's security team moved through the crowd like sharks through reef, but before they reached Megan, the event coordinator tapped the microphone on the small stage. The amplified feedback cut through the tension, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could gather near the stage, we're ready to begin our recognition ceremony." Dylan looked at Vanessa, who squeezed his arm and whispered something that made him nod. Then he turned to Megan with a smile that was pure malice wrapped in politeness. "Actually, stay." His voice carried across the beach. "Everyone should see this. Everyone should understand what real generosity looks like versus what you represent." He walked toward the stage with Vanessa, his gait slightly unsteady but his intention crystal clear. If Megan wanted to be here for his moment of triumph, he'd make sure she witnessed every second from the front row of her own humiliation. The crowd converged, 200 guests forming a semicircle around the stage. Lawrence Chun positioned himself with a clear sight line, both cameras rolling. Megan stood at the edge of the crowd, still as a statue, watching. Dylan took the microphone, and for a moment his showmanship returned, that charisma that had built an empire and bent a city to his will. "For months ago, I was dying. Kidney failure doesn't care how much money you have or how many people owe you favors. It just takes and takes until there's nothing left." His voice cracked authentically, and several guests nodded in sympathy. "The doctors said I needed a transplant. Without one, I had weeks, maybe days." He pulled Vanessa up beside him, and she looked down with perfectly practiced humility. "My wife at the time," he gestured toward Megan without looking at her, "made it clear she wasn't interested in helping. Too squeamish, too selfish, too busy thinking about herself." The crowd's energy shifted, judgment settling on Megan like smoke. "But this woman—" Dylan's arm tightened around Vanessa. "This angel stepped up without hesitation. She got tested. She matched. And she gave me a piece of herself so I could live. That's love. That's sacrifice. That's everything my ex-wife will never understand. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes. The crowd applauded, some enthusiastically, others politely. Dylan basked in it, color returning to his face with vindication. So tonight, I'm announcing a $1 million donation to the Pacific Kidney Foundation in Vanessa King Prescott's name, honoring the woman who, Dylan. Megan's voice cut through his speech like a scalpel. She moved through the crowd, which parted instinctively. Before you write that check, I need to ask Vanessa a medical question. Dylan's smile turned vicious. We don't owe you. What's your blood type, Vanessa? Megan stopped at the base of the stage, looking up at the woman in white. Simple question. Should be easy to answer, considering you donated an organ. Vanessa's perfectly composed expression flickered. I don't see how that's A positive. Megan answered for her. Your blood type is A positive. I know because it's on your gym membership application, which is public record at the Honolulu Athletic Club. She turned to face the crowd, projecting her voice without the microphone. Dylan's blood type is O negative. Anyone with basic biology knowledge knows O-negative patients can only receive organs from O-negative donors. A-positive blood would trigger immediate catastrophic rejection. The crowd went silent. Dylan's face drained of what little color it had regained. You're lying, Vanessa said, but her voice wavered. Am I? Megan pulled her phone from the small clutch she carried, tapped the screen twice, and suddenly the projection screen behind the stage, meant to display heartwarming photos of Dylan and Vanessa, lit up with a medical document. Hospital billing statement. Megan Prescott, laparoscopic donor nephrectomy. Same date as Dylan's transplant. Another tap. Surgical consent forms with Megan's signature. Another. Pathology report confirming kidney removal and successful transplantation. That could be faked, Dylan said, but his voice had no strength behind it. Could this? The next image was a DNA compatibility report, official letterhead from Honolulu Medical Center, showing a 6-antigen match between Megan Prescott and Dylan Prescott. Perfect compatibility, the kind that saves lives. Beside it, another document appeared. Vanessa King's blood type from her medical records, obtained through legal discovery channels. Positive. Incompatible. Impossible. The crowd erupted in whispers that built to a roar. Megan climbed the 3 steps to the stage, and neither Dylan nor Vanessa moved to stop her. She took the microphone from Dylan's slack grip. My name is Megan Prescott, and 4 months ago I anonymously donated my kidney to save my husband's life. Her voice was steady, clear, reaching every corner of the beach. I did it because despite everything, I loved him. I did it without telling him because I knew he wouldn't accept it from me. And I did it knowing he'd probably never find out. She turned to face Dylan directly, and the cameras captured every nuance of his devastation. But then he chose to humiliate me, to throw me away like garbage while praising the woman who lied about giving him my organ. So now everyone knows. The final document projected behind her. Dr. Marcus Webb's notarized affidavit, confirming every detail, signed and sealed and legally bulletproof. The kidney inside you is mine, Dylan. It has been this whole time. And Vanessa. Megan turned to the woman in white, who looked like she might shatter. You've been slowly killing him with grapefruit and alcohol and salt because you don't know the first thing about post-transplant care. Look at him. The crowd looked, saw the swelling, the pallor, the sweat, the trembling hands. That's organ rejection. That's what happens when someone trusts a beautiful lie over an ugly truth. Megan set the microphone down on the stage with a soft thunk that echoed through the sound system. Then she walked off the stage, through the silent crowd, back toward the torchlit path. Behind her, Dylan collapsed. Dylan hit the stage floor hard, knees first, then hands bracing against the wood as his body folded. The sound cut through the stunned silence like a gunshot. Vanessa screamed his name, reaching for him, but he shoved her away with enough force that she stumbled backward in her white gown, flowers falling from her hair. "Don't touch me." His voice was raw, broken. "Don't you dare touch me." The crowd surged forward, then stopped, caught between the instinct to help and the recognition that they were witnessing something too intimate, too devastating for intervention. Camera flashes exploded like small bombs. Lawrence Chen's crew captured every second. Two guests who happened to be doctors pushed through anyway, kneeling beside Dylan to check his vitals. One of them looked up at the crowd, face grim. "Someone call an ambulance. He's in acute distress. Possible rejection episode." Vanessa stood frozen on the stage, mascara starting to run, the saint costume crumbling in real time. Guests who'd congratulated her minutes ago now looked at her with something between pity and disgust. A woman near the front spoke loud enough for others to hear. "She's been feeding him whatever she wanted. Rita told my housekeeper he drinks every night. I heard she didn't even know about the medication schedule. A positive blood. How did she think she could donate? She lied. She's been lying this entire time." The whispers built like a wave gaining speed, and Vanessa's eyes darted around the crowd, looking for an ally, finding none. She'd built her entire identity on being Dylan's savior, and in 3 minutes Megan had burned it to ash. Dylan looked up from the stage floor, his eyes searching the crowd until they found Megan standing at the edge of the gathering. She hadn't left. She'd stopped to watch the structure collapse, the same way someone might watch a building they demolished fall exactly according to plan. "You," he gasped. "You actually did it. You gave me. I gave you a kidney." Megan's voice carried across the beach without amplification. "I gave you your life, and you gave me divorce papers before the anesthesia wore off." She walked back toward the stage, and the crowd parted like they were afraid to touch her, like she'd become something larger than human. She climbed the steps again, standing over Dylan while he knelt, the reversal of power so complete it was almost biblical. "You want to know why I demanded cash instead of company shares?" Megan looked out at the investors, the business partners, the city officials who'd come to assess Dylan's fitness to lead. "Because I knew exactly what would happen. I knew he'd marry her," she gestured to Vanessa. "And I knew she'd destroy him because she doesn't understand anything beyond appearances and Instagram posts." Dylan tried to stand, got halfway up, then had to brace against the stage floor again. The doctors murmured to each other, one of them already on the phone with emergency services. "I knew he'd let her feed him grapefruit because she thinks she knows better than transplant teams. I knew he'd drink with her because she encourages it, thinks it makes him strong. I knew he'd ignore every symptom because admitting weakness would mean admitting he'd chosen wrong." Megan's gaze swept across the assembled crowd. "And I knew all of you would eventually see it too." She pulled a folded paper from her clutch, held it up. "This is a letter from my attorney, dated the day after our divorce was finalized. It outlines every medical protocol Dylan needs to follow to keep the transplanted kidney healthy. Diet restrictions, medication schedules, warning signs of rejection. Everything Vanessa should have known if she'd actually gone through donor surgery." Megan handed the letter to the nearest doctor, who skimmed it and looked at Dylan with something like horror. "You haven't been following any of this?" Dylan's silence was answer enough. "I sent this letter to Dylan's office 3 months ago." Megan's voice had no triumph in it, just cold statement of fact. "Certified mail. He signed for it. He never opened it because it came from me, and he'd rather die than admit I might know something he doesn't." "That's not," Dylan started, but his protest died when Megan pulled out her phone, showed the certified mail receipt with his signature captured on the Postal Service tracking system. The crowd's whispers turned harsher now, judgment landing on Dylan as heavily as it had on Vanessa. "Fool. Arrogant. Blind." The words drifted through the tropical air like poison. An investor near the back spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm pulling out of the Maui expansion. This organization is being run by someone who can't even take care of himself." Another voice, The man chose pride over medical advice. What else is he wrong about? The empire Dylan had tried to shore up with this gala was crumbling faster than his health, both casualties of the same fatal flaw, believing his own mythology over objective truth. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The ambulance would be here in minutes. Vanessa stood at the edge of the stage, crying openly now, no longer the angel but just a woman who'd gotten caught in a lie too big to survive. Megan descended the stage steps for the final time, and as she passed Dylan, she stopped. Leaned down so only he could hear, though Lawrence's camera caught the moment even if it couldn't catch the words. "I loved you enough to give you a piece of myself," she said softly. "You loved you too much to accept it. That's the difference between us." Then she straightened, turned to the crowd one last time, and her voice rang out clear and final. "Subscribe to honest people, not beautiful liars. Hit that like button if you believe actions speak louder than Instagram posts. Comment truth over image if you're tired of people who fake their way through life." She walked toward the torchlit path, her crimson dress catching firelight one last time. Behind her, the paramedics arrived. Behind her, Dylan Prescott's world ended not with violence but with exposure, the way all empires built on lies eventually fall. And she didn't look back once. The video went viral by sunrise. Not just locally, nationally. International news picked it up by Monday. Mafia boss divorces wife who secretly saved his life, played on loop across every major network. The footage of Dylan collapsing on stage juxtaposed with Megan's DNA evidence, becoming the kind of story that transcended tabloid drama and entered cultural conversation. Megan watched it once from her apartment, then turned off her phone and went to physical therapy for her surgical scar. She had healing to finish. Vanessa King Prescott, the name she'd taken felt like a curse now, disappeared from social media within 48 hours. Her Instagram went private, then deleted entirely. The luxury boutiques where she'd been a regular customer suddenly had scheduling conflicts when she tried to book appointments. The charity boards she joined asked for her resignation with carefully worded emails about organizational restructuring. Honolulu's high society had a long memory and zero tolerance for public humiliation by association. She'd been the angel. Now she was the fool who'd lied about organ donation, who'd nearly killed a man through ignorance, who'd built an entire identity on stolen valor. The shunning was absolute and merciless. Dylan survived, barely. For days in intensive care, his body in acute rejection that required emergency intervention. They stabilized him with high-dose immunosuppressants, put him on the transplant list for a second kidney because the damage Vanessa's care had caused was irreversible. The kidney Megan gave him was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do except manage the decline. He'd need dialysis within 6 months. Another transplant within a year if he was lucky enough to get one. And this time, there would be no devoted wife secretly carving herself open to save him. The business collapsed faster than his health. Investors pulled out. Partners dissolved contracts. The Maui expansion died in committee. Prescott Enterprises stock dropped 40% in a week. Federal investigators, emboldened by his public weakness, started asking questions about his organization's financial dealings that they'd been too afraid to ask before. Dylan lost everything that mattered to him except his life, and even that was on borrowed time. He came to her apartment 3 weeks after the gala, January cold turning the usually warm Hawaii evening sharp. Megan saw him through the peephole, gaunt, pale, leaning heavily on a cane he'd never needed before. She almost didn't open the door. But curiosity was a hard thing to kill, so she did. "Megan." His voice was a shadow of what it had been. The command gone, only pleading left. "Please, I need to talk to you. You have 2 minutes." She didn't invite him in, just stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "I was wrong." The words came out broken. "About everything. About you. About Vanessa. About what mattered. I threw away the only person who actually loved me, and I need you to know. That you're sorry?" Megan's voice was flat. "That you realize your mistake?" That you want another chance. Yes. His eyes were desperate, wet. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I'll give you everything. The business, the houses, whatever's left. Just please. Dylan. She said his name gently, almost kindly, which somehow made what came next worse. I don't want anything from you. I already took what I needed. The 5 million bought me freedom and time, and the ability to watch you destroy yourself without being collateral damage. She leaned against the doorframe. I loved you once, enough to give you a kidney. But love isn't infinite, and you drained every drop of mine the day you chose her over me. I was stupid. I was blind. You were exactly who you are. A man who values appearance over substance, who trusts beautiful lies over ugly truths. That's not a mistake, Dylan. That's character. She started to close the door. He put his hand out to stop it, and she saw how the fingers trembled, how the skin looked gray even in the warm light from her apartment. Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I need you. You need a kidney. You need medical care. You need someone to fix what Vanessa broke. Megan's eyes were dry, clear. But you don't need me. You never did. You just need what I can give you, and I'm done being a resource for your survival. Megan. Goodbye, Dylan. She closed the door, locked it, listened to him stand there for a long moment before his footsteps retreated down the hallway, slow and painful, the sound of a man learning too late that some doors, once closed, never open again. Megan stood in her small apartment, the one she'd bought outright with his settlement money, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, just the profound emptiness that comes after you've exorcised something that's been poisoning you for years. Her phone buzzed. A text from her real estate agent. Congratulations! Your offer on the Lanikai property was accepted. Closing in 30 days. Beachfront. 3 bedrooms. Enough space to start over, to build something that was entirely hers and owed nothing to anyone's name or money except her own. She walked to her closet, pulled out the crimson dress from the gala, and threw it in the donation bag. She wouldn't need war paint anymore. The war was over, and she'd won simply by refusing to keep fighting for someone who'd never valued what she'd given. 3 days later, Megan drove her new car. A Tesla she'd paid cash for, Arctic white and silent as a ghost. Down Kalananale Highway with the windows down and the Pacific sprawling blue and infinite to her right. Her surgical scar had healed to a thin white line, barely visible. A reminder that she'd survived cutting away a piece of herself for someone who didn't deserve it. At a stoplight in Kailua, she saw Dylan's face on the cover of a newspaper in a sidewalk box. Prescott Empire crumbles. Mafia boss faces federal investigation. She didn't buy it. Didn't need to. The headline told her everything. The light turned green. Behind her, a car honked. Insistent, desperate. She checked the rearview mirror and saw him. Dylan, driving his Bentley, thin and desperate, trying to get her attention. He pulled alongside her at the next light, rolled down his window, called her name. Megan looked at him once. Really looked, seeing the ruins of the man who'd thrown her away like garbage after she'd saved his life. Then she pressed the button that rolled up her window. Smooth, electric, final as a coffin lid closing. The light changed. She pressed the accelerator and the Tesla surged forward with that silent electric power, leaving Dylan behind at the intersection. His voice swallowed by traffic and distance and the absolute indifference of a woman who'd already grieved him and moved on. In her rearview mirror, she watched him grow smaller, then disappear entirely. Megan drove toward Lanikai, toward the house she'd bought with his money and her freedom, toward a life that belonged to no one but herself. The sun was setting over the Ko'olau Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, and for the first time in 4 years, she felt like she could breathe without measuring the cost. Rich, free, alive, and owing not a single piece of herself to anyone. If you believe loyalty and sacrifice should be honored, not exploited, if you stand against people like Dylan who use and discard those who love them, then hit that subscribe button. Only manipulators and frauds would scroll past. Don't be a Dylan. Don't be Vanessa. Be someone who values truth. Comment justice for the silent survivors if you're done with beautiful liars getting away with betrayal. The road stretched ahead, empty and full of possibility, and Megan Prescott drove into it without looking back once.